The battlefield still smoldered. Captain Kael Riven moved slowly, each bootstep crunching over blackened synth concrete and carbonized bone. What was once a frontline outpost now looked like a melted skeleton torn apart by plasma barrages and sonic artillery. His HUD flickered, the tactical overlay trying and failing to find a friendly beacon. The air reeked of burnt polymer and ozone. His comms unit hissed nothing but static. He was alone. Kael's armor was half fused to his skin at the shoulder, and his breath came in ragged pulls through a cracked respirator. Blood his own, and not just his own, streaked his gauntlets. He didn't remember the last time he saw a medevac drone. Maybe 3 hours ago. Maybe a lifetime. Time folded in on itself out here. He moved not toward hope, but away from death. That's when he saw the light. It wasn't a beacon or flare. It pulsed soft and irregular like a heartbeat, a faint bioluminescent shimmer leaking from the collapsed northern structure. His weapon came up automatically, half on instinct, half on exhaustion. Kael pushed through the debris, stepping past a half-buried transport module and ducking under a half-melted beam. And there she was. Chained to a wall, her limbs draped awkwardly, skin an opalescent gray that shimmered faintly even in shadow. Her eyes snapped open the instant he entered, silver irises ringed with electric violet. A Virelin, female, alive. She didn't speak, neither did he. He pointed the rifle. She didn't flinch. Her gaze held his like a blade. Her lips were cracked. A line of blood had dried across her cheek. Her breathing was shallow tight. Kael looked down. Her ankle had been shackled not by debris, but by a magnetic clamp, human-made. His pulse kicked. This wasn't an enemy combatant. This was someone we left behind, or betrayed. Without speaking, he reached into his utility belt and pulled out a canteen. Her eyes darted to it. Her expression, until then unreadable, cracked. Caution still rooted in his every movement, Kael uncapped it and crouched. He raised it toward her mouth. She didn't move. "You want it or not," he rasped. Still silence. He tilted the canteen. A drop spilled onto her bottom lip. Her tongue moved slowly, tasting it. Then she opened her mouth. She drank like she hadn't tasted water in days. Maybe she hadn't. The moment stretched. Then just for a second, her hand brushed his glove. Not grabbing, not attacking. Just a light, trembling contact. Her fingers were cool trembling. Her breath shuddered as she looked at him again. This time, her expression wasn't guarded. It was something between awe and disbelief. Then something happened. A shimmer passed between their hands, a flicker of light like a miniature aurora. Kael flinched. She gasped. Their skin hadn't touched. Not really. But he felt her. Not pain, not hunger. Something else. Loneliness. The Virulent woman pulled her hand back, eyes wide, as if she was the one who'd seen a ghost. She looked down, away, shaking her head, but it was too late. Ooh. He'd felt it. Kael stood up slowly, eyes narrowing. There was a voice on the edge of his mind now, not in words, but in sensation. Fear, yes. Shame. But also wonder. He didn't know her name. He didn't even know why she was here. But the war, at least in this moment, didn't seem so clear anymore. And when he reached down to disengage the magnetic shackle from her ankle, her hand reached for his again. No words. No thanks. Just that flicker again. Like a thread had begun to weave tight, unseen, and irreversible. The landscape beyond the outpost was a graveyard of metal and ash. Kael helped her through the shattered perimeter fence, her arms slung over his shoulder, their uneven steps crunching over scorched rock and warped alloy. She limped slow, but determined, her bare feet dragging through debris. The clamp had left a bruise around her ankle, deep purple and veined with faint green. He tried not to look at it. The wind kicked up dust and a sickly shimmer of atmospheric residue. Kael adjusted the visor over his good eye and scanned the terrain. No signs of movement. Good. And bad. They were on the wrong side of the retreat line, too far from extraction, too deep into what was now considered neutralized territory, which meant no reinforcements, no drones, no help. Only each other. She hadn't spoken yet. He wasn't sure if she couldn't or wouldn't. Her kind weren't big on human languages, and the translator embedded in his armor had taken a hit. But when he glanced at her, her eyes always found his, as if studying every flicker of his expression. At one point, she stumbled. Kael turned instinctively and caught her before she fell, his arms tightening around her narrow frame. For a moment, they were pressed chest to chest, her breath ghosting against his collarbone, the scent of ozone and something faintly floral drifting from her skin. She looked up startled, not because he touched her, but because he didn't recoil. "You're not afraid of me," she finally said, voice hoarse, her accent musical. Kael blinked. "You talk." She gave a faint smirk. I listened too. They huddled beneath the broken hover tank that night. The temperature dropped fast in the dead zones. Kael built a makeshift shelter using scorched fabric and parts from the wreckage. The virulent woman, he still didn't know her name, watched him with fascination, like the act of survival itself was a kind of sacred ritual. He tossed her half a protein ration. She sniffed it, poked it, and finally took a bite. Her eyes widened in exaggerated disgust. "Your people eat this by choice?" she asked. Kael smirked. "We call it flavor enhanced. It tastes like metal regret." They both laughed quietly but genuinely. That night, curled in the dim warmth of salvaged insulation, she edged closer. She didn't say anything, but her head found his shoulder. Her breath slowed. She slept. Kael didn't. His mind swirled with questions. Who was she? Why had they chained her in a human outpost? What was that feeling earlier when their skin came close? It was like a surge of memory that wasn't his, a pulse of sorrow that left behind warmth. She shifted in her sleep, murmuring something in her own tongue. Her fingers twitched, reaching for nothing. Without thinking, Kael took her hand. He felt her pulse before he heard it. A slow melodic thrum, not just heartbeats, but something deeper, rhythmic, resonant. And then he saw it, not with eyes, but with something else. A flash, her face younger, standing in a crystalline temple. Voices raised, an argument, a betrayal, then pain, chains, and fear. Kael's breath caught. He pulled his hand back like it burned. Her eyes snapped open. "You saw it," she whispered. He didn't answer. She sat up slowly. "We call it Karel Thana, the threading. It's not supposed to happen between species." "Then what is it?" he asked. She hesitated. "A mistake, a miracle. I don't know." Kael leaned back, staring at the dark sky above twin moons, casting dull reflections across the ravaged earth. Whatever this was, it was no ordinary escape. He'd violated orders, gone rogue, and now something deeper than skin was connecting them. The next day, they moved again. She walked better now, though she still winced with each step. Kael offered to carry her. She refused at first. But when the wind picked up and acid rain started to fall in streaks, he didn't ask a second time. He simply swept her up into his arms. "Your people have strange customs," she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Yeah," he grunted, trudging forward through mud and smoke. "Carrying someone like this, it feels intimate." He glanced down at her. "It is." She tilted her head, studying him again. "And yet you didn't hesitate. You needed help. I helped." The virulent woman fell quiet, lips parting slightly. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "No one from my kind would have done that." Kael didn't reply. The smoke thickened around them. But he felt it again, that invisible thread. Tighter now. Not a chain, not a shackle. A tether, built not on duty, but choice. And that was stronger than any order he'd ever obeyed. They found the chamber by accident. Kael had scanned the ridge ahead, half collapsed, marked with strange architectural shapes, too smooth, too deliberate to be natural. No blast marks, no decay. Alien design, ancient, and not human, not Varellan either. As they approached, the mountain began to hum. A deep subsonic vibration that buzzed in Kael's chest plate. The woman, still leaning against him for balance, tensed. "You feel that?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her fingers were tight around his arm. At the base of the slope, beneath a jagged arch of living stone, the hum grew louder. Not threatening, just there. Almost beckoning. The door wasn't locked. It wasn't even closed. The two stepped into a chamber lit from within. Bioluminescent vines coiled along the walls, casting soft teal and violet glows. The air felt warm, pressurized, like entering a womb carved from light. In the center, a structure part throne, part cocoon rose from the floor. Organic, pulsing, waiting. Kael aimed his rifle. "It's a relic," she whispered, voice tight. "A conduit node, from before the split." He turned. "What split?" "My people," she said slowly, once shared thought. Not just speech. Feeling. A hive mind almost, but chosen. When we left that behind, places like this were buried. Forbidden. "So why is it open now?" She looked at him, gaze glowing. "Because it recognizes us." Before Kael could respond, her knees gave out. He caught her just in time. Her skin was cold. Too cold. She convulsed, once breath shallow. Sweat beaded on her brow, glittering faintly with biofluorescence. "I can't. It's too much," she rasped. "The energy. My bond with you. It's pulling on me." Kael scanned her. Vitals unstable. Pulse erratic. No medkit. No nanostim. No backup. His HUD sputtered again, useless. She clutched his wrist with trembling hands. There's one way, she said, staring at the pod-like structure in the center. The node. It links, heals, but it requires resonance. He didn't move. It needs a shared field, a biological sync, a gift, from me to you. Her hand moved to the high collar of her tunic and pulled it aside. Kael froze. At the base of her neck, below the clavicle, was a bioluminescent gland pulsing faintly, a soft opalescent reservoir beneath her skin. "What is that?" he asked. "My Eli Mir," she said, voice shaking. "A nourishment gland. Part healing, part bonding. You drink, we link." Kael blinked. "You're saying I have to drink from you?" "Yes." He stared at her. Then the pod behind them pulsed, hard. Lights intensified. The room buzzed as if impatient. Her eyes fluttered. Her breath grew shallow. "Kael," she whispered, using his name for the first time. "Please." There was no time left to weigh morals or taboos. She was dying. This place, whatever it was responding to them. And he wasn't ready to lose her. Not now. Not after everything they'd survived. He stepped closer. Gently, he brushed her hair aside, exposing the gland fully. "Tell me if it hurts," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "It won't. Not for me." He pressed his lips to the glowing node. The taste was warm, electric, like honey laced with starlight. A pulse ran through him instantly, searing down his spine. His heart kicked like it was rebooting. His vision blurred, and then exploded. He saw her. Everything. Not in images, but in feeling. Her childhood under crystalline domes. Her first bondmate lost to war. The terror of betrayal chained in silence. The moment he offered her water and she felt seen. The warmth of his arms, the rough honesty of his voice, the softness of his gaze when he thought she wasn't watching. It all poured into him. Kael gasped, falling back, but something held him. Not her hands, not the pod. The thread. Now a cord thick with light connecting them not through touch, but thought, emotion, memory. She opened her eyes. They were glowing. So were his. The chamber responded, flowering open like a biometal bloom. The central pod extended twin vines, one to each of them. The nodes latched gently onto their skin. "Lie down," she said, breathless but calm. Kael obeyed. The vines lifted them both, cradling their bodies into the core of the structure. The resonance began. Their minds collided. A storm of sensation. He felt her fear as his own. She felt his doubt. They moved past words, past the limits of biology. Their cells sang to each other. DNA spiraled in unison. At some level, their molecules began to recognize not just each other, but themselves in the other. Their bodies arched, and somewhere in that pulsing light, surrounded by the breath of a long-dead civilization, something new ignited. "Life!" She gasped, hand flying to her stomach. Kael stared, dazed. "What was that?" Her voice came slow, distant, reverent. "I think we just made something impossible." They emerged from the chamber transformed. Kael's armor, once cracked and scorched, had been sealed by tendrils of living alloy that pulsed with soft blue light. The burns on his side gone. His muscles felt different now, more fluid, more responsive. His breath came easier, his reflexes sharper. But it wasn't just physical. He could feel her now. Not like before. Not just surface-level glimpses of emotion or passing thought. This was deeper. Every heartbeat, every breath, every tremor of instinct, they passed between them like shared currents in a neural tide. She looked at him, her eyes no longer merely silver but threaded with pale gold. And she smiled. "You hear me, don't you?" she whispered without speaking. Kael didn't answer with words. He simply nodded. Because he did. The link was real. Permanent. Their consciousnesses had braided together inside that alien chrysalis, and something sacred had chosen to honor the bond. The ruins around them began to shift. Not collapse. Reconfigure. The chamber that had once been a tomb now peeled open like an ancient mechanism, remembering its function. Walls lit up with holographic displays, ancient glyphs rearranging themselves into schematics. "Language matrices are syncing," she murmured aloud. "It's adapting to us." Kael stepped closer to one of the glowing interfaces. His fingers hovered over a diagram, two beings entwined, standing in a spiral of energy. Below that, something egg-shaped. A child. He looked back at her. She was already holding her stomach. There was no need for confirmation. He felt it. A tiny third signal pulsing faintly in harmony with their own. But their awe didn't last long. The alarms came first. Low pulses across their shared field, then sharper. External sensors activating. Something was coming. No, many somethings. Drones. I count 12, Kael said, his voice calm, steady. I count 14, she corrected with a smirk. He blinked, then grinned. Right. You've got the better senses now. They're heading this way. Armed. Human build. So Command had found him. And they weren't coming for a rescue. Kael turned to the nearest wall of the chamber. One of the glyph clusters was flashing an interface glowing in response to his proximity. He reached for it uncertain. The glyphs pulsed, and a weapon grew from the wall. It formed like bone knitting over metal, then clicked free, sleek, curved, not quite a rifle, not quite a blade. He gripped it. It fit perfectly into his palm. His HUD flickered and then updated pulse-fused resonance, armament human Virelin compatible. She summoned her own. Her version was more elegant arch-shaped trailing pulses of light like a tuning fork vibrating at lethal frequency. They're almost here, she said. Kael's eyes narrowed. Then let's see what this bond can really do. The drones burst through the arch and formation plasma rifles raised targeting systems acquiring. Kael moved. Before he could think, she was already in motion beside him. Not ahead, not behind. With him. Each step matched, each strike harmonized. Their weapons sang together, his striking with explosive force, hers slicing through armor with a high-pitched shriek. They didn't need words, they didn't need strategy. They were one mind in two bodies. Kael ducked and she fired over his shoulder. She leapt and he boosted her midair with a kinetic pulse. Their shared field adjusted in real time. His instincts became hers. Her finesse became his strength. Even the enemy hesitated. The drones programmed for standard opposition faltered in the face of such unpredictable unity. One unit tried to flank them. Kael turned, but she had already spun to intercept, her eyes flashing gold, her blade humming with righteous fury. The last drone fell split clean in half. Kael lowered his weapon, panting. She touched his back and anchor, steadying. They were alive, and far more than that. He looked down at his hand. A faint glow traced the veins beneath his skin. Their bond wasn't fading, it was deepening, reinforcing itself with every threat survived. Then the ground beneath them shook. A new figure emerged through the smoke. Tall, heavily armored, not drone, human. The insignia was unmistakable, black and gold. Command Intelligence Corps. Experimental Enforcement. Behind him, more troops, fully armed, tactically positioned. Kael raised his weapon again. Stand down, Riven! The commander's voice barked through an amplifier. Not happening, Kael growled. She's dangerous. She saved my life. She altered your biology. You're compromised. The Virelin woman stepped forward, not cowed. We share a bond. We've studied Virelin resonance rituals, the commander snapped. We know what this is, and what it could do to our people if it spreads unchecked. Kael stepped in front of her. Then maybe it should spread. The commander raised a hand. His troops moved forward. But then something else happened. The third presence. Faint at first, then bright. The unborn child's pulse surged across the shared field and beyond. Not just to Kael, not just to her, but to everyone. The human troops staggered. Some gasped. One fell to his knees. Kael felt it, waves of emotion amplified and echoed. Not rage, not fear, but peace, understanding. As if the child had reached through their doubt and offered clarity. The commander removed his helmet. His face was pale. What was that? Kael exhaled. Hope. The Virelin woman stepped beside him, her voice calm but resolute. We didn't ask for this bond, but we won't undo it. We're not just human, not just Virelin. We're something new. The troops didn't raise their weapons again. They didn't run either. They just watched, uncertain. The old world trembled around them, and something far more powerful began to grow. The ship that arrived hours later wasn't human. It was Virelin, smooth-lined and crescent-shaped, gliding through the smoky sky like a cut of moonlight. It hovered silently above the ruins, no engines, no thrusters, no sound. Only light pale blue, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Kael stood beside her, hand resting on her lower back, the other still gripping the hybrid weapon that had grown from the chamber. She was calm. The child inside her pulsed steadily in their shared awareness, warm, curious, unafraid. The Virelins didn't speak when they descended. They felt. A dozen of them emerged draped in flowing armor eyes, shimmering with ancient resonance. Each stepped softly, reverently, as if treading holy ground. Their leader, taller than the rest, had silver markings across his brow and cheekbones. He stopped 3 paces from them and placed his hand over his chest. Nyari Thalis, he said to her in their native tongue. You've returned. Kael didn't need translation. He felt what the Virelin was projecting, shock, awe, a hint of confusion. But beneath it all, reverence. Not for Nyari alone. For them. I was taken, she replied calmly. but I was not broken. The Elder's eyes flicked to Kael. A surge of distrust rippled through the air, then wavered, halted, diffused by something subtler. The child. They felt it too. A new rhythm in the field. An innocent presence that resonated with the frequency of unity. The Elder turned, spoke to the others in a dialect Kael couldn't follow. They lowered their weapons. Their posture shifted, not submission, not surrender. Acceptance. But peace is fragile. And the sky cracked again. This time it was both fleets, human and Varellan. Warships gliding into atmosphere, bristling with armaments. Ready for a confrontation, neither side fully understood. The commander from earlier approached comms unit, blinking red. High Command wants an explanation. So does the Varellan Council. They're both saying this is a violation of interspecies accord. Kael looked up at the sky, then back at Niari. She stood straight back, serene, as if she'd already made peace with what would come next. "We show them," she said softly. "Show them what?" She reached for his hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. The glow intensified, immediately radiating across the battlefield, across every comm link, every frequency. Not interference. Emotion. Projected outward like light from a star. And suddenly everyone felt it. Not thoughts, not propaganda, not tactics, but love. Not romantic and soft, but primal. Fierce. The kind of connection forged in battle, in shared survival, in surrender and awakening. It coursed through minds and machines alike. Even the enemy AI, cold and logical, registered a shift in baseline awareness. Commanders fell silent. Fleet captains lowered weapons. Back aboard the Varellan mothership, old warriors cried openly. Kael gripped Niari's hand tighter as their child's signature expanded, reaching frequencies neither of them could process. Colors shimmered in the air, real visible emotion. Auras of meaning. Truth without language. It was too much for some, but not all. From the human fleet, a single ship broke formation and descended, unarmed. The voice that came through Kael's helmet wasn't from command. It was from Admiral Corvinday himself. "We're listening," he said. Niari and Kael stepped forward, not military, not emissaries, just two beings with a child between them and a resonance so powerful it broke protocol and rewrote biology. In the hours that followed, new protocols were drafted. Hushed negotiations took place within reinforced biotents, the air thick with tension and electromagnetic silence fields. Kael and Niari attended none of them. They were not diplomats. They were the evidence. And soon a name was agreed upon. The Resonance Accord. It was not peace in the traditional sense. But it was the beginning of something new. An experimental initiative between species once considered incompatible. Not just for medicine, not just for communication, but for connection. Their child, unnamed to the galaxy, but known intimately to them, became a focal point. Not a weapon, not a specimen, a living interface of empathy, a bridge species, capable of reading and reflecting emotional currents across cognitive walls no translator could breach. Even in the womb, the child could feel a general's fear, or a scientist's awe, or a medic's silent sorrow, and respond with warmth. Some called it a miracle, others an existential threat. But for Kael and Niari, it was neither. It was simply family. They chose exile not long after, not out of shame, not from pressure, but to protect something delicate. A cabin was granted on a garden moon far from the war fronts and embassies. There, beneath twin suns and silver-leafed trees, Kael learned to read the Varellan stars. Niari learned to eat burnt rations with only mild complaint, and their child kicked harder every time they laughed together. They named him Alarian. It meant the echo that chooses, and the galaxy finally began to listen. Years passed. The garden moon bloomed under quiet suns, and the cabin became more than a refuge. It became a cradle of something the galaxy had never seen: harmony. Not a utopia, not a dream, but a daily rhythm of difference and closeness braided into the same life. Kael grew his beard out. Niari braided it when she was bored. She kept her combat knives sharp, hidden under floorboards. Kael pretended not to notice, but he moved the furniture so Alarion wouldn't find them. Their son, by age 2, could hum in harmonics that made birds sing along. By 4, he could intuit when someone was lying. By 6, he no longer just reflected emotions, he redirected them, gently nudging people away from hatred or grief, with nothing more than a pulse of color behind his eyes. He was beautiful. Not just because he shimmered faintly in low light or because his silver-gray skin turned warm when he laughed, but because of what he represented. Life stitched from opposites. Love pulled from the ashes of war. A choice, not a mistake. And still the galaxy watched. Drones passed silently above their clearing once a week. Satellites hovered just beyond the atmosphere. Medical journals whispered his name like a spell while governments scrambled to predict what he might mean. But in the cabin, none of that mattered. Only when Nyari stirred restlessly in her sleep, sensing a global spike in tension. Only when Kael's old armor pinged with unauthorized activation requests. Only when Alarian asked, "Why do I make people afraid?" Kael answered that one with care. "Because they've never seen someone like you," he said, tucking a strand of glowing hair behind his son's pointed ear. "Because you're what comes next, and they're still holding on to what came before." "But I didn't do anything." "Exactly," Kael smiled. "You don't have to." Then one day the knock came. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't military. Just a soft chime and the hiss of a decompressing landing ramp. Nyari opened the door first. Standing outside were 3 children, each different. One scaled, one chitinous, one human. Behind them, a woman in a doctor's robe with the crest of the Morris Venn Institute embroidered on her chest. She bowed. "We'd like to begin the trials. Not in a lab, but here, with you, if you'll have us." Kael stepped into the doorway beside Nyari. Alarion peered around their legs, then walked straight up to the trio of visitors. He didn't speak. He just reached out a hand. The other children took it slowly. And for the first time in recorded history, 4 species stood together, hands linked, not in treaty or in trade, but in trust. Inside Kael and Nyari's minds, the old connection pulsed again. It had never dimmed, but now it resonated anew. Stronger, wiser. Her thought brushed his. "We did it." His reply came without hesitation. "We started it." And outside beneath twin suns, the future finally arrived. It didn't roar in with engines or plasma fire. It walked, small feet, open hearts, and eyes full of stars. From the wreckage of war to the quiet light of a distant garden moon, Kael Riven and Nyari Thales defied the odds, the protocols, and the histories of 2 civilizations. What began as a rescue mission twisted by fate became something far greater, a bond that transcended biology, culture, and war. Their child, Alarion, wasn't just a hybrid of species. He was a living bridge capable of resonating with emotions across boundaries that once seemed immutable. Through the choices of 2 brave souls, the galaxy glimpsed a future no treaty could ever draft, a future rooted not in conquest, but in communion. And maybe, just maybe, this isn't just a story. Maybe it's a map, a guide to what might happen when 2 enemies choose to feel, to trust, to hope. Maybe the next revolution won't be one with plasma rifles or fleet deployments, but with touch, with empathy, with one impossible connection that rewrites everything. If you felt something, anything while listening to their story, help us tell more. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Let us know, what would you do if the enemy looked at you not with hatred, but with wonder. Until next time, stay curious, stay human,